Were the Romans mere copycats of the intellectual Greeks, or were the Greeks simply small in comparison to the great Roman Empire? The Greek Empire produced philosophers like Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. But at its peak, the Roman Empire occupied a fifth of the world. Keep watching if you want to know who would win in a strongest empire battle. Originally, kings ruled Athens, then an oligarchy, a few rich people, then democracy. Oh, yeah, the Greeks invented democracy as we know it, in 508 BC. Even though citizens voting meant much more power to the people, it also led to the fall of the empire. City-states formed leagues that started fighting. Remember the Roman saying, divide et impera? That's divide and conquer in Latin. The quote actually belongs to Philip II of Macedon, who was Greek. But Julius Caesar made it famous. By the time Julius Caesar was ruling, the Greek Empire had already collapsed. Rome was initially ruled by kings too, but the Romans saw what was happening in Greece, so they created a republic, mixing democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy. In both politics and art, the Romans were good at getting inspired by the Greeks, then perfecting the laws or techniques. In 31 BC, the Roman Empire was born when Augustus proclaimed himself emperor. They stayed an empire until 1453, which saw the fall of Constantinople. Let's look at a short military history of the Greek and Roman empires. Ancient Greece was always fractured into smaller fighting factions, so it was defined by warfare. Between 800 and 480 BC, a period known as Archaic Greece, increased urbanization led to the formation of city-states. These were always in conflict, but there is a silver lining. This is how the Greek Empire created some of the strongest armies and battle tactics in the history of warfare. The phalanx is possibly the most famous tactic invented by the Greeks. It was a unit of tightly grouped armored spearmen. They fought as one, and the combined weight plus the spears meant almost guaranteed success in battle. The only problem was that they were very, very slow. Hilly or rocky terrain could prove disastrous. In 338 BC, Philip II of Macedon conquered Athens and Thebes, along with all city-states in the vicinity of Macedon, in an attempt to unite fighting legions. He brought big improvements to the Greek army, stronger cavalry, and a phalanx with lighter armor and a longer spear, the fearsome sarissa, 20 feet long. Philip's son Alexander the Great united all Greek cities, Sparta, Thebes, Athens, and Corinth. His army and strategies were unparalleled. In a few years, he conquered everything between Greece and India, including Egypt and the Persian Empire. He never lost a battle, even though most times he was outnumbered. Apart from the phalanx and cavalry tactics that he had learned from his father, Alexander the Great always made use of the terrain. Also, he had a very loyal army, partially because he would always be involved in battle. In his first battle in Asia, at Granicus, Alexander used only about 13,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry against a Persian army of 40,000. He placed the phalanx at the center and cavalry with archers on the wings, while the Persian infantry was stationed behind its cavalry. This ensured that Alexander would not be outflanked. Also, his phalanx, armed with long pikes, had a great advantage over the Persian scimitars and javelins. This battle was a definite success for Alexander the Great. Unfortunately, after his death, the generals went back to fighting over power. The Greek Empire became divided and easy to conquer once again. As the Greek Empire was in decline, Rome, which wasn't an empire yet, saw an opportunity. They declared war on Macedonia in northern Greece, then their other cities. The Greeks' final defeat was the Battle of Corinth in 146 BC. Even though the Greek Empire no longer existed, Greek culture continued to influence the Romans from within. Greek art and philosophy is the foundation of Roman culture, and the Greek language was used in the eastern part of the Roman Empire for hundreds of years. Many Roman emperors and politicians spoke Greek as a sign of intellectual status. As the Roman Republic became an unstoppable force, it also became an empire. In 60 BC, Julius Caesar had achieved a very high military rank, being called imperator. This doesn't make him emperor though. This was just a title big enough to get him elected into the Senate. After 20 years of debt and unpopularity, Julius rose to power as dictator, following his victories against Egypt, Gaul, and others. His extravagance would shock all human and animal rights activists today. Once he made 2 war prisoner armies fight to the death in the Circus Maximus, leading to the death of about 4,000 people, 400 horses, and 40 elephants. Some people rioted against this, but Julius had them sacrificed by priests. It was a full-blown dictatorship, and Julius paid for it, with his life. He was assassinated by his Senate colleagues in 44 BC. The Roman Empire began under Julius Caesar's nephew Augustus in 31 BC. Augustus perfected the famous Roman legion, expanding it from around 4,200 infantry to a staggering 5,200. He also established the auxilia, an army made of non-citizens around the same size as a legion. The auxilia provided light and heavy cavalry, archers, and light infantry. By the end of Augustus's reign, the Roman army comprised 25 legions and 250 auxiliaries. 90% of the Roman population was made of non-citizens during that time. The Roman army is probably one of the strongest aspects of the Roman legacy. Their unprecedented expansion is probably due to their extraordinary army and battle tactics. Here's 3 tactics that the Romans mastered. 1. The phalanx, the Greek battle tactic perfected by Philip II. The phalanx proved very useful in the first years of the Roman Empire. However, its slow movement and lack of flexibility led to some disasters when the Romans tried conquering rocky terrain. 2. The maniples were smaller, more flexible units, often arranged on a checkerboard pattern. They were split into different roles and were ready for any scenario, much like a wolf pack. 3. The cohort. As the Roman Empire grew like crazy, the maniples were just too small. The cohort was as big as 4 maniples, and for the first time, self-sufficient. They were their own little army who didn't need Rome to supply them with anything. This made them very flexible and very scary to their adversaries. The empire reached its largest expansion under the Emperor Trajan from 98 to 117 AD. This can be considered a peak of the Roman army. In 117 AD, the Roman Empire was 5 million square kilometers big. In 285 AD, Emperor Diocletian split the empire into the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. This made it easier to rule such a huge land because now there were 2 centers, Rome for the western one, Constantinople for the eastern one. Still, the empire proved harder and harder to govern. Politicians and rulers became more and more corrupt, and the armies became less reliable. The Western Roman Empire was slowly destroyed by Germanic tribes, Goths, Visigoths, Franks, and Vandals. In 476 AD, a German tribe leader called Odoacer took control of Rome. He became king of Italy and forced the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, to give up his crown. The Eastern Roman Empire became the Byzantine Empire and continued to thrive for another 1,000 years. Yes, the Byzantine Empire continued as a mix of Greek and Roman culture, language, and laws. Its army was known for impeccable organization and strategic prowess. The legion was replaced by the cavalry arm in the 7th century, and there were strong Asian influences to the weapons, such as the Turkish composite bow and the cavalry mace. The Byzantine Empire wasn't as prone to expansion as the original Roman Empire, staying in between the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea for most of the time. Growing smaller and smaller, it fell under the Ottoman Empire in 1453. Some say strength lies in legacy, so perhaps the real battle between these 2 great empires shouldn't be one carried out on a field and by looking at history books. The Greeks provided culture and philosophy that is still the foundation of most Western culture today, and the Roman laws still form the basic systems and ideas of European and American laws today. Civil rights, trial by jury, personal property, just to name a few. Which empire do you think has left a greater legacy? And who do you think would win in a battle between Alexander the Great and Trajan? Let us know in the comments.